Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming today and being with all of us here at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in your house. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
I think it's great that you guys are still out on tour playing this incredible music. It's really great to have you here. I know we were talking in the green room a little bit. Both of you have worked with us before many times, including Ron, you performed as part of our Aretha Franklin tribute.
Yes,
And the next year, Ernie, you came out and played with our Chuck Berry tribute that year.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
So I want to take it back to the beginning and talk a little bit when the Isley Brothers actually formed out of Cincinnati back in 1954. And Ron, it's really a gospel group at that point, right? It's you, it's O'Kelly, it's Rudolph, and Vernon at that time performing gospel as a quartet, right?
That's correct.
And what were some of the inspirations that got you started in music? Was music in your house? Was it something that you knew you were going to do or something you discovered?
Yeah, mother and father. My mother was very, very instrumental in putting our group together and listening to all the records on the radio, and it's just something that we were born to do. Yeah.
I know I've heard you talk about, is it Dixie Hummingbirds was something that you listened to in the early days?
Yeah. Listening to Nat King Cole, and Dinah Washington, Frank Sinatra, all country and western. They wanted us to learn everything, so we learned everything. Clara Ward and the Ward Singers.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
It's interesting. I think a lot of people don't realize that so many artists like you guys listen to a lot of different stuff. It's not like you were listening to one thing, right?
You're right.
And did you find ways to pull influence or different things that you were doing in the group from all those different styles?
Yes, we did. And, just learning and listening to all types of music and coming along with my brothers later on to play instruments, and that was something my father wanted, so we could be self-contained, yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, in 1957, you guys move up to New York City. And that's where you start doing some of that secular music, not just the gospel.
Yeah.
What was that early period like for you and the brothers being up in New York City trying to make it in the music business?
That was the most exciting thing to us, that to try to make a record, and we felt like if we would make a record and everybody would hear us, then we would be famous.
The easy formula, right?
Yeah. And then we made a record, our first record, and it went back to Cincinnati, and disc jockeys played it in Cincinnati, and it made #1. And we thought that was, and it didn't make #1 nowhere else. Right?
Just Cincinnati, right?
And we thought, wow, the whole world had heard us, Yeah. But it was the most exciting, one of the most exciting things in I had to say in our time, it's just the greatest feeling in the world.
Yeah. There's something really special about that first time you hear your own music on the radio, right?
Always walking around, now we're famous like Frank Sinatra or somebody.
Well, I'll tell you, by the time you hit 1959, Ron, and you record Shout, man, that is really when you guys do break worldwide and people start listening. What was it like putting that together? How did that come together? I know you've talked in the past about being inspired by Jackie Wilson a little bit in making that, right?
Yeah, we were inspired by Jackie Wilson. We were singing in Philadelphia at the Uptown Theater. And last show, I started to sing Lonely Teardrops. And the audience was going crazy. And so it transferred from that to singing what the audience was doing. You make me want to shout, kick my hands up, throw my hands in the air, and come on now, And it was like I was singing everything that the audience was doing. And everybody was going, they were going so crazy that, everybody standing up and shouting. And we came back to New York, and we were talking to Hugo and Luigi, who was our records producer, and we were telling them about the show. And so they said, why don't you record what you were doing and bring some of the audience or some of your friends with you in the studio? So my brothers and us, we said, okay, we're going to try that. And then we brought some friends back, to the studio. And it was just, that song was a gift from God. The words, the everything. When I look back at it now, while I was trying to write the song, it was just a gift from God. It was our first hit record. And we sang it, a little bit softer now, a little bit softer now, a little bit louder now, and hey, hey, And from that moment on in our career, it's just exploded.
Yeah.
And 59, and we're here today in 2019.
Still playing it, right?
Every day.
Every day. I think there's probably not a single person out here who hasn't danced to that song a million times, right? I mean, any wedding, party, high school dance, you name it, for the last 60 years, people have been dancing to that song.
We started off, our family started dancing. Ernie was a kid, maybe 4 or 5 years old, coming to all of our shows at Wildwood, New Jersey, and Atlantic City, and we call all the family up on the stage, say, well, you may. I said, when I do my hands like this, I want everybody would stand up in the audience. You make me want it. Boy, the whole family would, woo! So much fun. So much fun.
There is that opening you just sang, Ron, by the way. Like, the moment your voice starts, you feel it in your body that you're being called to something unique, right?
Yes. Yes.
The other thing I was going to mention about that, of course, is that I love that story, the way you're saying, from that live performance, and how do you capture that on record? So when it comes out on the 45, the hit single, it has to be parts 1 and 2, right? Because you need to take the jam, you can't cut it off.
Yeah.
So it's got to run to the B-side. That sort of became a thing for you guys throughout your entire career. I was just making the short list, and I won't even name all of them, but For the Love of You, Make Me Say It Again, Girl, Live It Up, I Want to Be With You, The Pride, Fight the Power, they're all parts 1 and 2.
Yes, it was.
And labels didn't always love doing that, but that sort of became your signature thing, right?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Why was that? Why were they willing to let the Isley Brothers do a parts 1 and 2 45?
Well, we had our own company at the time, and so we would let ourselves do it. All right. And,
It helps to be in charge.
definitely. Everybody should remember that.
That's right. Of course, there's another great smash hit in the early 1960s, 1962, Twist and Shout, which was a Burt Burns, another Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, a Burt Burns tune, I think originally recorded by the Top Notes, but it's your version, again, that everybody remembers, right? Your version's the one the Beatles covered. Yeah. Your version is the one people talk about. Tell us a little bit about Twist and Shout, how that came about.
All right. The version that was first recorded wasn't like the version that we did. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the same lyrics or nothing. We changed the lyrics.
Right.
For the time that we recorded, and they offered us half of the song, and we said, no, we'll give it to Burt Burns.
Yeah. Is that right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We sang it one time in the studio at the same time. We were singing Make It Easy on Yourself, written by Burt Bacharach, which was supposed to be the record. We were at the time trying to do the same thing that Johnny Mathis was doing. And one of the songwriters had changed the words to make it easier on yourself to Are You Lonely by Yourself? And Bert Bacharach walked in the studio and said, that's not my song. What happened to the words that we wrote? And they were like in an argument. And he walked out of the studio, and we had 5 more minutes left in the studio. And so we went on to do the song that we rehearsed, Twist and Shout. Wow. Sang at one time, and then everybody was still kind of mad, and we didn't get a chance to hear it back because so we'd ran out of time. And I was thinking, like, our career is over. Walked out of the studio. Somebody, Jerry, by the name of Jerry Blabbett, he was out of Philadelphia.
Heater with the heater.
Yeah, they made a demo of the record, and he played it on his radio station, and it exploded everywhere. Twist and Shout. Shake it up, baby. We heard it, and we say, wow, that sounds pretty good. That sounds real good, And so it went on to sell over 1 million records. Then we went to, I think the next year, going to London. I ran into the Beatles, and Paul McCartney on the elevator, he said, we recorded your song. He said, do you think you like it? I said, that's great. Well, at the time, the Beatles were singing Shout and Twist and Shout in Liverpool, imitating our group. Woo! They were doing it, woo, shaking their heads. Said, you guys are not mad. I said, no, man, that's good. No, we became pretty good friends then. Yeah. And they went on to be the Beatles.
Right. By 1964, some of the stuff's coming out on Atlantic, and a guy that a few people in the audience may know is playing guitar with you for a little while, named Jimi Hendrix. So tell us a little bit about that, Ron, where Jimmy's sort of basically playing guitar and helping you guys out a little bit.
All right. I don't know what happened to the guitar player we had before Jimi Hendrix, but I was introduced to him by a fellow by the name of Tony Wrights. He said, you got to meet this guy. He's one of the greatest guitar players I ever heard. And so he introduced me to Jimmy. Jimmy didn't have a guitar then. He said his guitar was in the pawn shop.
He didn't even have one? Right.
So he said, if I get his guitar out the pawn shop, he could audition for our group. So we did that. And he put some strings on his guitar and talking to us at the same time, and he started to play some of the songs, and it was just incredible. We'd never heard anyone like that. And so immediately he didn't have nowhere to stay, and he moved into our house with my other brothers, with my mother, and stayed there for couple of years, 2 or 3 years. He loved his guitar. He took it everywhere he went. In talking to everybody, he would, even when he didn't have it with him, he'd have a stick or something in his hand, and he would just be playing that and talking to you. And he was so great that all the places we played, people would, like, you know how his style was, they would go crazy. But at the time, no guitar player had any records out, and he tried to sing, and I would say, he had a low voice. We said, no, you don't sound like no singer. And that became the style with him and Bob Dylan and them at the time, later. And he wound up going to London and meeting some people over there, and his career took off, like nobody's career, At the time he was making a record like Purple Haze There was no other record out like that, you know. Dun, 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 Perez, I did my-" And it was very, very successful, and he became known as one of the greatest guitar players, yeah. And my brother Ernie would listen at him sometime. Ernie was playing baseball then. He wasn't, but I guess somewhere in Ernie's heart, he remembered Jimi Hendrix playing. And when he did start playing, he became like the second Jimi Hendrix.
I agree. Ernie, I think you are one of the great rock and roll guitar players, for sure. Can you tell us a little bit? I know you've talked a lot, and you've done some different tributes to Jimmy. What was so special about Jimmy's music that you found and you were able to build on and kind of take to another place in your career?
First thing was he practiced a lot. And whenever I heard him playing, I'd find a social studies book or something and come in the same room that he was, but I wasn't doing social studies. I was observing and listening to what he was doing. And the night that the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan for the first time, on the left side of the couch was me. On the right side of the couch was my younger brother Marvin. And in between us was Jimi Hendrix himself.
Whoa.
And, when Ed Sullivan said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles," nobody has a crystal ball. You don't know that Jimmy was going to eventually be like an electric guitar deity. That was in February of '64. A few days went by, and there was a meeting with the whole band. And my eldest brother, Kelly, amongst other things, said, this English group has changed everything. The Beatles have changed everything, and I think we're going to be all right because they do both shout and twist and shout. Now, they got two guitar players, but we got Jimmy. And when he said, "But we got Jimmy," I looked over at Jimmy, and Jimmy was grinning ear to ear at that remark because it was true.
That's amazing. I'm going to jump forward a little bit. I want to just at least mention, there's a period in 1966 where the Isley Brothers are recording from Motown, and the great hit "This Old Heart of Mine," which you guys recorded a Hollandozer and Holland tune, later recorded by the Supremes after you guys. And it would have seemed like that would have been the period maybe where you would have had it going up another level, but the Motown thing didn't really work out all that much. I mean, you guys had some great records there, but it just didn't seem to gel, right?
Well, at one time we learned what they were doing with Holland and Dozier and some of the other writers, and we wanted to do our own songs. Right. And we knew we had to take a chance on putting a label together like they did in Detroit. We wanted to do that. I wrote the song "It's Your Thing" at the time. I said, I don't want it to be here at Motown. I want it to be on our label.
Right.
So I didn't want Motown to hear it until we could record it ourselves. And so I asked Barry Gordy for, could we have a release to do our own thing? And he said, if that's what you want to do, fine. And we got that release. We went in the studio and recorded the song "It's Your Thing," and we had made our own label.
Teaneck.
Teaneck, that's where we were living, in Teaneck,
New Jersey, right? Yeah.
And so we went and took that record to Neil Bogart, and he released us. And when he released that record, it did 5 million copies.
Woo! And Ernie, you're playing in the band at that point too, right?
Yes, Ernie would play.
I played bass on that record.
Yeah.
I always think when you hear "It's Your Thing," for me, that feels like a transitional record for the Isley Brothers. You're
Yes.
kind of coming out of that early gospel R&B and maybe that Motown class you took a little bit there, but now It's Your Thing is the stepping stone of what happens next.
Everybody was doing their thing, and so that's what the title was. Sock it to me. Everybody was saying that.
Right.
So at the time I wrote the song, It's Your Thing. Everybody was doing their thing, and and it was a tremendous record for us.
Yeah. I got to talk then a little bit about that period now. Once you get that creativity and you guys own T-Neck, and then eventually Ernie Marvin and Chris Jasper joined the group, right? And you guys are all working together. Amazing period, right? I got to mention That Lady, which is a song that you had recorded back with Atlantic in '64, I think, as Who's That Lady, right? But then that re-recording that you do, I have to say personally, one of the most amazing songs. I remember listening to it on the radio with my mom and dad all the time. Your vocal, Ron, Ernie, that guitar solo that seems to go on forever and we wish went on longer. Talk a little bit about that remake of That Lady in 1973.
I'll let Ernie explain that. Go ahead.
Off of the 3+3 album, which I gotta
Yeah.
say is one of my favorites.
Yeah, well, at the time we were getting ready to go to California to record, and Ronald said we're gonna do That Lady, Who's That Lady over again. And I was like, huh? He said, no, we're gonna change the tempo, change the lyric, change the melody, and you are gonna play lead guitar on it. I was like, okay. So at the time that we did it, the music track itself was quite rhythmic, quite funky.
Yeah.
And when the lead guitar went on it, it went from like black and white to 3D Technicolor. And nothing that we had ever heard or anybody had ever heard sounded quite like that. And when we first played it for CBS, they said, well, it doesn't sound like It's Your Thing. I mean, it doesn't have saxophones or trumpets on it, but we like it. And it's particularly the guitar thing. So how should we market it? And our response was just put it out, let it go everywhere. And it turned out when it came out, it did go everywhere. It was not confined to a R&B station or top 40 station or a rock station. The song was just everywhere, and it was a tremendous hit.
You're right. I think it's got parts that you can hear rock in it. You hear, some of the funk and the soul. It's got all those pieces in there, right?
Yes. That's what made it such a tremendous, inclusive kind of a record. It was just everywhere.
Ernie, I hear there's legend that there was a legendary lost first take of that guitar solo. Is that true?
Well, the first time through, I was just playing, and it was wonderful. And then we had to cut back for the vocals. I was like, ah. So I played a second take. The second take is what's on the record. The first take, that was like playing a Fender Strat on Mount Olympus. It was out of here. But no, that one got away.
It was too far out to even exist on this plane of existence, right?
Yeah,
it just had to take off and go where it belonged.
Yeah.
I want to talk about two records.
And it's one of the favorite records that we do in our show every night.
Right.
Who's That Lady?
Yes.
Looking in the audience and looking at all the ladies in the audience, everybody's, I'm that lady. Pointing to yourself. Yeah.
I got to talk about two records that are back-to-back in 75 and 76, Fight the Power and Harvest for the World. And I want to think about both of those songs because I think both of those are so topical for right now, for today, right? And Ernie, I think it's the story that those sort of came out of some stuff from your ideas of both Fight the Power and Harvest for the World sort of, even though they're on two different records, those songs are sort of A and B, is that right?
Yes, Fight the Power is something everybody does. And certainly at the time that we did that record, after the success of, like Work to Do and Love the One You're With, and then Here Comes That Lady and Live It Up. When we came out with Fight the Power, everything about our persona sort of changed, elevated. And we became a thing. That album was #1 Billboard. The Heat Is On featuring Fight the Power. And it was also our first platinum album. The next year was Harvest for the World.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. 3+3 was platinum.
Well, 3+3 eventually went platinum.
And the next one was platinum.
And the next, Live It Up. True. Okay. To be correct, yes. And since then, they're all like double platinum.
You know, Ernie wrote "Fight the Power," so and he wrote the song "Harvest for the World" too.
Yeah. The Harvest was a 12-string guitar, and I had just gotten a 12-string guitar, and I liked the tone on the instrument and started playing, and that song sort of came out, just inspired. And both songs, obviously, we have a very close connection to it, and the messages in the songs are always present. It's not like, oh, we did that back in Fight the Power, that's 1975, or Harvest for the World, that's 1976. The messages in those songs are prevalent to this very moment.
Ernie, if you don't mind, I want to just read a couple of the lines from Fight the Power to that point about them being relevant today. Given up all around me, faces full of pain. I try to play my music, they say my music's too loud. I tried talking about it, I got the big runaround. When I rolled with the punches, I got knocked on the ground, but all this bullshit going down.
Now, originally that was nonsense.
All this nonsense going down?
Well, Ronald said, bullshit. And I was like, okay. Okay. And that was what really made that song stick, because I was thinking, you can't say that. And Ronald was like, if you say it, that's what you intend to say. And at least you were true to yourself. And if they play it, great. But if they don't, at least you were true to yourself. And it turns out that they played it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And was that in the studio you decided to change it, Ron, when you were recording it?
Yeah. Change it right when we were, and in fact, they were all looking through the glass, and when I said it, everybody, they knew that was the right word to say.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and thank you for speaking the truth, right? Yeah. It's important to do that. Yes.
All right.
Of course, that song ends up influencing Chuck D and Flavor Flav and Public Enemy, and they take that as the entire inspiration for their song Fight the Power years later in the 80s, right?
That's correct.
Have you guys ever talked to Chuck about that at all?
All the time that we were running into each other, we talk about that. And I thought this song was just a great song. Like Ernie said, it changed our career a little bit too, because, we played the Madison Square Garden that year, and we had 20,000 people outside of the Madison Square Garden with signs, "Fight the Power." They couldn't get in because it was 20,000 inside. Yeah.
I also want to talk, thinking of Public Enemy, you guys might be maybe right behind James Brown as one of the most sampled groups in the world of hip-hop. Artists are using bits and pieces of your song in their music as inspiration. I have to mention it, we just announced the nominees for the class of 2020. They'll be voting, the fan vote is open now. On that list is Notorious B.I.G. And of course, in his song Big Papa, the entire backing track is Between the Sheets, right? Yeah.
Cause I see some ladies tonight that should be having my baby.
My baby. What did you think about when you hear songs like that? When you hear Notorious B.I.G. or, Ice Cube, the Beastie Boys, Eminem, right here in Cleveland, Bone Thugs and Harmony, all these groups sampling and building on what you guys did in that groove?
They were great. Everybody that you call out was a special rapper. B.I.G. He was one of the greatest. Ice Cube. He's one of the greatest. The group, Bone Thugs
and Harmony, yeah.
They were one of the greatest. The great rappers did our songs first, and then everybody did them. Secondly, Jay-Z, all of them. And we loved it. We loved every one of them.
Then, of course...
And our catalog has been sampled more than James Brown.
I feel like it's up there, man. It's unbelievable when you look at the list of artists that have used it. And even on influence, if you think of someone like Kendrick Lamar today, they're all still pulling influence from you guys, right?
And that's a blessing. It's truly a blessing.
I also want to talk about in the 2000s, the Isley Brothers have this incredible resurgence yet again, and you change your sound a little bit another time. You have to mention the album Eternal and the song Contagious, right? Yeah. That really brings you in a whole nother direction. And Ron, you start, going forward, Ron Isley, AKA Mr. Biggs, right?
Well, at the time, I was, summoned by R. Kelly's manager. He wanted to meet me, and we had a talk about his mother was a fan of ours, and he had a song that he had wrote and he wanted to do with me. The song was Down Low. And Ernie and myself, I think we were in Florida in the studio, and we did that song together. And he talked about his family and what we had meant to his family and this and that, and a whole lot of things. And then he wrote a couple of songs for our album. Then I think the first song was "Can We Lay?"
Yeah, let's lay together.
"Can I Have a Kiss?" And those things. And later on, he wrote the song "Contagious." He wasn't in the studio, and I came to Florida to do the record, and his engineer was in the studio, and me and his engineer, Donnie, they played the record for me, and I worked on it and sang this song, and when he came in and heard it, he flipped. He just flipped out, And I think R. Kelly is one of our great songwriters, and we had became super friends. And I think he's one of the great songwriters. And from that time, even to now, and that song did wonders for us. I think the album at the time when 9/11 was about the time that it came out. The album was close to 3 million then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so many other great people on that album. I know Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis worked with you on that. I think Nile Rodgers co-produced one of the tracks, right? I mean, incredible lineup of other artists in there. So let me think a little bit about this then. You've had all of this incredible career. You're out on the road now. Tell us a little bit about, you were saying, Ron, every night you're still playing Shout. You're still doing That Lady. What is it like to continue to play for audiences that honestly have multiple generations? John in the intro joked about who's been a fan for 20 years, 40 years, 60 years. What is it like to play to those audiences now for both of you guys, and that music that still resonates so much?
If we didn't do Who's That Lady and Shout, we would
People
be
would storm
booed
the stage.
Everybody would want their money back. That's a must. That's a must. It's Your Thing. It's a must. Those songs. We do 90 minutes and sometimes a little bit longer, but and it's hard to do. I may walk out there and say to the audience, I got 350 songs to sing, and they will scream, you know. But we have to do that, and we love doing those songs. I wouldn't want to do a show without including them.
And Ron, what's it like for you singing all those and the reaction of the audience? Or Ernie, for you playing guitar, why do you keep doing it? Why do you keep playing live for the fans?
You know, well, I'll answer that first. You know, I live to do that. I live to do that. I can't wait to see their faces and their excitement. And
You know, it's been a journey, and to have done, embraced and received by virtually everybody in the business. I mean, everybody knows Shout and Twist and Shout. On the one hand, This a Heart of Mine, It's Your Thing, etc. Then there's folks that know us through Between the Sheets, Footsteps in the Dark, At Your Best You Are Love. So our thing has stretched across generations, and it's because of the support of the music lovers that that's been possible. That's been a very singular blessing. There's no other artist that's been around for 60 years and still sitting here now. That's divine grace. And thanks to all of you for your support.
Well, we're almost out of time, but I've got a couple questions we had from the audience here that they filled out some cards when they came in. So let me read a few of these here and see if we can get to some of these. So the first one here says, who has been your greatest role model or inspiration? Who's been your greatest role model or inspiration?
Well, I'll start off by saying Sam Cooke, Ray Charles, Jackie Wilson. Then I will move on to say Clara Ward Award singers and Frank Sinatra and all the great singers. My father was crazy about Bing Crosby and Perry Como and all those singers. And he would invite his friends to the house and he would ask us to sing, I'm working on a railroad, and you know, and we knew all of them. We knew all the great people, you know, and he wanted us to be like the Mills brothers. He wanted us. He said they'd lasted so long, and you know, I would want you all to have a group to be just as great as them, and I think we accomplished that.
I think so. I think so. Ernie, I had one specific one here that was called out for you. Someone out there, Ruben, I think it says here, asks, how do you come up with the guitar riffs? Do you feel like you're speaking through the guitar? What do you think of when you're creating some of these great classic guitar riffs for the Isley Brothers?
That's inspiration more so than anything else. I went down, before we did the lead guitar solo on That Lady, I went to a guitar store on Sunset and I plugged in and I played both the rhythm part, and then I discovered in the store the lead tone. But nobody came over to me and said, what are you playing? Or why'd you? All of that kind of stuff came later. So really, to answer that question, that's just really inspiration. And you know, you'd be fortunate enough to be inspired like that, and then you have songs like That Lady, or Fight the Power, or Footsteps in the Dark, Voyage to Atlantis. And then it comes, you know, the way it comes through by what we're doing, when I hear it back, it's amazing. I'm like, wow, man, that's really, really good. And it happens to be us, you know. So the inspiration thing for me, For artists,
Yeah.
obviously that comes from my family, from my brothers in particular.
Yeah.
And you know, our group is very competitive. We listen to everybody, and we want, you know, we hear different records that we think it's great, and we say, I want to write a song like that. I want to,
Right.
you know, other songwriters, Paul McCartney, and people like that. I want to write a song like that. And you sit down and take your pencil and piece of paper and try to come up with it. You
Right.
know, you say, and when you come up with it, you say, I think I got it, you know. And most of the time, you will have it, you know.
Yeah.
You have to be competitive. You have to be competitive. Man, God gave us a talent, and we're going to use it. We're going to be competitive.
I think the last question we have here from a Katie in the audience, and I think it's a good one to end with. She wants to know, do you have a favorite part of your career? Is there something you look back on, any particular part of all this history we've talked about today that's your favorite?
Wow.
I would say the very first time that we performed Fight the Power live, it was in Oakland, California, at the baseball stadium. And we were getting ready to leave the stage. The audience was going crazy, and we got to the foot of the steps, and Ronald stopped and said, let's go back and do Fight the Power. And when we did, pandemonium. You know, it's like, we got a hit. That's one of my favorites.
How about you, Ron?
Well, I have a whole lot of specials. Shout was one the first special song that we did and seen the audience go crazy, like I said. And I was singing what they were doing, you know. And Who's That Lady? It was the same feeling. When we did It's Your Thing, boy, oh boy. And, you know, and Fight the Power, and on and on. How many songs do we have?
Like you said, 350.
Twist and
true?
Shout.
Do you know how many? Is it? It's got to be a big number, right? You
Whatever
probably
he says, whatever.
The two of you have probably forgotten more songs than most people will ever write in their lifetime, right?
Well, I think we did over 400. 400 yeah.
It's quite a few.
Quite a few. But all those songs, you know, it's a story behind each one of them. Drifting on a memory. It's a story behind that. It's a story behind all of those songs. Hello, It's Me, Summer Breeze, just all those songs. Atlantis, the slow songs.
The baby-making music.
Yeah.
Yeah, Don't Say Goodnight.
Yeah, Don't Say Goodnight. And they still remember, you're contagious, touch me, baby, give me what you got. Woo.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. It has been a real honor to have both of you here today at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, Ron and Ernie Isley of the Isley Brothers.